Welcome to Trust Issues, only the kind that make you richer.
All right, welcome back to Trust Issues, only the kind that make you richer. I'm Ruma Mazumdar, a real estate and estate planning attorney, founder of Key Esquire, and someone who has seen so many people build wealth, but only to leave it exposed. Today, we're talking about something I see people overlook all the time: how real estate connects directly to your estate plan and what can go wrong if you don't treat it that way. Whether you're a first-time home buyer, a real estate investor, someone who just inherited a family home, this episode is for you. So let's get into it. Most people treat real estate and estate planning as two separate things. You buy the house, you deal with the title company, you deal with your attorney, you get the keys, and then maybe years later, you think about, maybe I should put a will in place. People are talking about this will thing. But here's the problem. Your real estate is a major asset, and if you don't include it in your estate plan, you're setting up your family for confusion, court involvement, and potential loss. I had a previous client actually call me back today asking to add his wife and kids to the deed just in case something happens to him. And I remember back when he came to me as a client, we're going through his contract, and I asked him, do you have a spouse or a partner? And he said, I do. And I was like, well, is this going to be your marital residence? Are you going to live there with your family? He said, I am. And then I asked him if he wanted to put his spouse on title. And at that time, he said no. And I said, are you sure? He's like, yes. And then now he calls me back, lo and behold, to actually do the thing I had asked him about originally. I then learned he also has minor children. And so I was explaining to him that it's important he get his estate plan in place because you can't add minor children to a deed. And you actually, regardless of whether they're minor children, you don't want to add them to the deed because you're going to create a whole host of new headaches for them. And open them up to all sorts of liability, and open yourself up to liability as well. So how you own, how you title, and how you plan for your real estate really determines whether it becomes generational wealth or a family burden. So the minute you buy real estate, you also need to plan for the future. Let's break something down that sounds simple, but is wildly important: how your property is titled. Now, if your property is in your name alone, like my client, and you pass away without a plan in place, it's going to go through probate. It won't automatically pass to your spouse and your kids or whoever you meant to leave it to. So you need to have a plan. And probate means going to court and having to get the authority to actually act on behalf of someone's estate and manage their assets. So with no plan, the state decides what happens. And sometimes you're not going to like that plan. Now, if the property is jointly owned with someone like a spouse or a family member with rights of survivorship, it can pass directly to them without probate. But not all joint ownership does that. Tenants in common, for example, doesn't do that. And in this scenario, each tenant has a % ownership of the property, which then gets distributed based on their plan or state laws if they have no plan in place. Like it sounds, it can get complicated. And then you have the option of putting the property in a trust, especially if you formed a trust, a revocable living trust. Your property can be titled in the name of that trust. That means when you pass, the trustee you name in your plan gets to take over immediately. There's no reason to go to court or delay, and there's no confusion. And then we also have a scenario where you might be a business owner, you might be an investor, and you buy a property in the name of an LLC, an entity, a corporation, whatever makes sense for you. And in order to figure out what happens in that scenario, you want to look at the formation documents, the operating agreement, or corporate bylaws and resolutions to see what exactly the member needs to do or the trusted officer needs to do in case something happens to someone. I can't tell you how many people assume the deed is fine because we're married or because we've been partners forever. Title is really everything. It's the foundation for your real estate legacy. One of the biggest things my clients come to me about is avoiding probate. How do I avoid probate? Truly speaking, though, in New Jersey, the probate process is not that scary. There can be delays, especially if the documents weren't done correctly. So you also want to make sure you're working with a professional that knows the court system and knows the process, knows the estate administration process as well. But it can sometimes be a little bit time consuming. You don't have all of the time in the world to go to the court, fill out papers, and wait for them to make a decision, right? And it can be expensive. It's also a public process. And that's why there's tools like a revocable living trust, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, and real estate that can bypass probate entirely. It's cleaner, it's faster, and it's private. To go a little bit more into probate, now let's say you own a home and then you pass away. Now your family has to hire an attorney, petition the court. They could have to wait a few months. They may deal with some legal challenges if someone decides to pop up and say, you told them they were going to get the house. And on top of that, they have to pay legal fees out of your estate. You've worked your whole life to buy something like a home, and suddenly it's just stuck in limbo, costing your family time, money, and energy. So if you want to be strategic about avoiding probate, you've got to think about estate planning. Let's just zoom out for a second. For most of us, especially millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, a home might be your biggest asset. It's where your equity actually lives, and that's where your generational wealth starts. But so many people treat it like it's just another item on the checklist. You buy the house, you get the mortgage, you move in together, you have some kids, you keep paying down the mortgage, and you just kind of continue in that cycle. It's not protected legally or strategically. It's totally vulnerable to lawsuits, creditors, poor decision-making by whoever ends up with it in case you don't have an actual clear plan. So that's where the estate planning, along with the real estate, comes in and actually benefits the people that you care about. Now, the biggest thing I also always get asked about, tax planning. I'm not a tax attorney, so not offering any tax legal advice here. Also talk to your financial advisor or your CPA about any sort of tax advantages. But let's talk about taxes for a little bit because I have a little bit of knowledge of it. Because tax advantages are a part of estate planning, and we'll partner with a specialist or a specialized attorney in this area if for some reason we need it. The one great thing about New Jersey is we don't have to worry about estate taxes, but we do have to worry about it on a federal level, just depending on the net worth of the estate. As far as inheritance taxes, a lot of people will be exempt, but there are certain scenarios where inheritance taxes will come into play. But in the real estate realm, one of the things that gets thrown around all the time, especially with investors, is a 1031 exchange. It lets you sell property and roll the profit into a new one without paying any capital gains taxes right now. But if you don't structure your ownership correctly, you could lose advantage of that. So you want to make sure you're working with someone who is specialized in 1031 exchanges to make sure you adhere by the timeline and you're doing kind for kind sort of exchange. Now, say, for example, your kids inherit your home. They might face a huge capital gains tax unless your plan includes a step up in basis, which resets the home's value to the date of death and minimizes the tax liability. So these are just some legal tricks we do through estate planning and are essential tools for really protecting what you've built. The difference between using them and not, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings or losses. So make the investment. Now let's talk about preventing property disputes. Family, we love them, we hate them, we cherish them. They can be great, they can be annoying. But oftentimes, real estate and estate planning can totally tear things apart if there's not a solid plan in place. I've seen siblings fighting over what to do with mom's house, one child wanting to sell, the other one wanting to live rent-free, a second marriage that gets things complicated, a blended family, stepchildren left out. There are so many different scenarios now that you have to take into consideration when you're planning. And estate planning really solves this. So by putting your real estate into a trust or spelling out your wishes clearly in your will, you get to avoid all of this drama, confusion, the hurt feelings, leaving people out, especially when these people are grieving and guessing. You just don't want them to be making decisions while they're clouded. And this is especially important if you're part of a blended family or you're leaving property to multiple heirs, 3, 4 siblings at a time who all have different personalities and an opinion about everything. So here's the takeaway for today. You don't need to have millions in the bank to start building your legacy. If you own real estate, you're in the game. If you own any sort of bank account, any sort of asset, you're in the game. But what determines whether that home or that asset becomes a burden or a blessing, it's the planning. And estate planning doesn't just protect the property, it protects your intentions as well. It ensures that what you're building outlasts you. It's the bricks and the beams into generational wealth. All right, so what do you do with all this information? Take a couple of actions. 1, check your deed. How is your property titled? Is it in your name alone, joint with someone else, in a trust? Ask yourself, who do I want this property to go to? How do I want this transfer to feel? Easy, private, peaceful? Then think about whether you should talk to your attorney about a trust or clear instructions in your will. And then finally, talk to a professional, whether it's me or someone else. Get the legal advice that fits your exact situation. If you've already started building wealth through real estate, don't let it end in the chaos. Preserve it, protect it, and pass it on. Your home is more than a roof. It's the result of everything you've worked for. And it's the beginning of something even bigger, a legacy. So estate planning ensures that legacy lives on exactly how you want it to. So if today's episode opened your eyes, share it with someone you know who owns real estate, or reach out. I'd love to walk you through what this could look like for you. Find us at keyesquire.com. Find me on social media at ruma.esq and also at Key Esquire on all social media platforms. Until next time, let's keep building, keep protecting, and remember, trust isn't just legal, it's personal.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.